So excited to welcome our next guest here on Off the Podium today. A man who doesn't really need much of an introduction, but I'm going to give a bit of an introduction here today. The most decorated US Winter Olympian of all time with 8 Winter Olympic medals. The co-leader in the most ever short track speed skating medals in the history of the Olympics. He's a member of the US Olympic Hall of Fame, has won more than 20 World Championship medals, is a New York Times best-selling author, winner of Dancing with the Stars, and a man whose blood is so powerful that if it hits the ground in Tasmania, it activates giant Tasmanian devils that will kill you absolutely everywhere you go. He is just about to release a brand new book called Hard Pivot, and we're here to talk about that today, some other highlights from his career and everything else in between. It is a pleasure to welcome off the podium, Apolo Ohno. Apolo, first of all, welcome to Off the Podium. It's an honor to have you on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And that's an awesome intro. That is definitely the most unique intro I've ever been given. So I'm very, very grateful and appreciative.
As a Tasmanian, there's no way I can avoid bringing that up at some point. We will definitely get to that. And I also should mention, as a Tasmanian, as an Australian, that it's something that I think a lot of our listeners from this part of the world would be familiar with, about you being between a Canadian and Australian when it comes to certain things. And we'll talk about that at some point. 20 years ago, you stood between an Australian and a Canadian at some point. But as I said, we'll bring that up. But you got a brand new book coming out, Hard Pivot, just about to be released, sharing about 5 golden principles for overcoming challenges. Now, give us a bit of an idea about the idea behind this book, sort of what brought you to writing this, and what's it about?
So the book took me about 2.5 years to write it. I started writing this book in actually the beginning of 2019. I had, at that point had been effectively about 10 years retired outside of my original Olympic path, had kind of gone through this multiple stage and iteration of what I would call like loss of identity. So being married to kind of the intro that you gave me, right, around like Olympic champion, Olympic medalist, and that transition and reinvention was really, really challenging, as it is for many athletes. And so I felt that like a lot of people, not only those who are coming home from sport or the Olympics or the military, but just in life in general, have these like various times in their life where they're really forced to reinvent or adapt to maybe an uncertain climate, or they lost their job or lost a loved one, and they're really forced to deal with some of those outcomes in real time. And I just felt that there was perhaps not an easier path, but maybe a more understood path in terms of transitioning beyond, in terms of how we can reinvent ourselves. And so I began writing that around this idea that there are a multitude of different options and toolkits that we can use at our disposal to at least embrace change in ways that we didn't think about before. So, that process was long, and it's really just geared towards people and individuals that both in their professional career, in their personal life, are really seeking for some sort of either upgrade, transformation, transition, or just complete reinvention, either by force or by choice. And so I open up the book by kind of talking about my own struggles and challenges associated with the internal process and what that was like, from identity of being this Olympian, and then figuring out like, shit, like what else am I good at? What else am I interested in? What else am I passionate about? Like what else is important to me? Do I have purpose beyond the world of speed skating and et cetera? So that was not an easy path. One that was pretty challenging. So I just felt that people were interested and hungry to maybe see and read around some insights that have been given to me throughout my life. Not saying this is the blueprint, but saying, hey, there are some alternative options here to help you transition beyond.
And it's interesting. I mean, you are like many other athletes in their sports. You are the face of your sport for so long, and as you said, you identify just as that, and then you've transitioned to so many other things throughout the years. So this book almost seems like a perfect fit. You have a lot of experience, trying this, trying that. But as somebody who is the face of a sport for so long, do you encounter a lot of young athletes where you feel like, whether it's through putting out this book or just interacting with them one-on-one, athletes in your sport or any others, where you can really kind of be a mentor to them?
Absolutely. So, I mean, look, I see the existing kind of US short track team multiple times throughout the year. And they are very different, both in terms of psychology and the way their thought process works towards the sport than I think that we were. It's a lot more options to, I think, show their vulnerability, be open, talk about things outside the world of speed skating, et cetera. So they're given these avenues. But then I don't know if I serve as a mentor, but I just want to I want to be able to open up this book in a way that says like, hey, like there's a lot of conversations that you have internally between your own two ears that perhaps you are not comfortable sharing with other people, either by insecurity, by conditioning, whatever that is. And I'm here to tell you that we can redefine what that word of strength and performance actually means. And so while we have full expectations and belief that you can perform at the highest echelons of performance on the planet, we also know that you're a human and there's other aspects of that process that sometimes are really challenging. So how do we balance those things in a way for you as a young athlete or you as an individual who is 60 years old looking to pivot into something entirely different? How do we do so in a way that perhaps is less painful and doesn't drag you down the wrong path, and instead brings you toward a path that is really more in alignment with what you feel like your purpose and true north really is? And that's hard to do, right? Because we're all so self-critical, and some of the things that I talk about in the book really revolve around this one component of like self-acceptance, right? So not self-acceptance in terms of like, I accept you and will remain as you are in this state today, but it's more of like showcasing to yourself individually that, hey, like throughout your process, you're going to have to be able to look in the mirror and have this like transparency with yourself and say like, you are not perfect. You are all those things that hold you back, and you're a self-saboteur and you are weak at times. And that's fine. That's totally like acceptable for who you are today. And then basically, I think it's not always self-appreciation, but it's like really just self-acceptance around like, I love who I see in the mirror, which we're not taught that, right? I mean, you're definitely not taught that in sport, and it's really uncomfortable. Like, like growing up, like as like a young, male athlete, I was conditioned that like, you should show no emotion at any time unless you win. That's the only time where you are allowed to show any sort of emotion in any capacity. Everything else, you hide like a poker face. And while there are like really powerful traits associated with that process, I think it just provides, it basically paints this poker face like falsity that is not totally wholesome in your life. And I think the more that you can basically come to terms with who you are in your state, the greater level of acceptance and then growth you'll be able to have post, meaning I accept myself for who I am. Now, what are the steps necessary for me to go from point A to point B, from 1.0 to 2.0? And then that only happens when you fully accept and you're really transparent with yourself. Basically, you own all the things that make you who you are today.
And is that something that you found was challenging for you personally to reach that point where you can not only openly discuss this and put it into a book, but accept yourself? I mean, as you were saying there, you're conditioned a certain way. You're not thinking about that way maybe during your career, but was there a point where it was starting to kind of click and then you thought, well, I want to help this with other people going through situations like I did at some point?
Absolutely. Look, I think, when you look at sport and then the topic around both mental health, accepting people for humans beyond that in which they represent as Olympians, it was really hard for a lot of the public to see, these superstar athletes like a Michael Phelps or a Simone Biles, right? Basically go to the Olympic Games and say, I'm not going to compete. I'm out. I don't feel well. And a lot of people were pissed off. They were like, that's not what it takes to be an Olympian. You're showing weakness. You're copping out. That was the first initial response because we're conditioned to believe that. But who am I who doesn't know this person who's competing on the world stage? I don't know anything about their background, where they came from, what they've gone through, or what's most importantly, what they're actually having between here of how I can export my belief onto them. And so we're living in a kind of a sensitive time, I think, where people want to identify with certain beliefs and systems. And when we don't have them, you then become an enemy to us. And so I did go through that process. It was really hard, man. I'm still going through that process, right? In like full transparency. Like, it's never something that I say that I've mastered. What I can tell you is that I do embrace change. That's something that I have really come to terms with. And I've come to expect change, and I've come to actually welcome change in a way where uncertain environments have tend to shown that I can perform at the best of my level. I can adapt to those environments. That's when I can find the greatest levels of performance. And so just like short track speed skating, which is, for those of your people who and listeners who have no idea what the sport is, it's like a master class in stoicism. You control the aspects of this sport and preparation for a 4-year or an 8-year journey, or even a 12-year journey to get to an Olympic Games. And then at the snap of a finger, you may be disqualified or fall down or just fall short of performing at that level. And so the world will then say, oh, that's too bad. Maybe that's a failure. You didn't have what it takes. You cracked under pressure. That's like the easy thing to say. And you can believe that and then live the rest of your life stewed in a moment of bitterness that controls the way that you perceive the world, its outcomes, and the potential for yourself. Or you can choose a different path and in full understanding say, like, I don't know why I didn't perform. I don't know why that happened the way that it did, but I can no longer control that outcome. I have to surrender to that outcome, take the insights and learnings from it, and then apply it in an intense way to actually propel me towards whatever else that I want to pursue and attack in my life. And I think that we have that choice. And so the goal here is to show people that life is always gonna lift you up, and it's gonna smack you down at the moments when you can't possibly imagine. When you feel like you're getting your groove and you're feeling like you're getting into the rhythm and you're starting to understand this, life says smack. It smacks you right in the face, knocks you down, and says, oh, don't forget who you are. You're not that person. You're not good enough. You're not attractive enough. You're not this, whatever, whatever these inside voices are telling you. And I'm here to tell you that those are noises to keep you constrained into the safe environment that looks familiar, that feels and acts as if this environment, because of the millions of years of conditioning we have in our DNA, this is the safe space. And safe space means that you're not going to die or get killed or get injured. And the only real growth that we have as individuals is when we push beyond that into this kind of uncertain environment where we're forced to figure out and scramble and basically pull ourselves together. So look, a lot of people talk about this. I think it's much easier to talk about it than to actually enact. And hopefully I can provide some tools and some resources in this book to help people just navigate through these waters. I have no idea whether they are going to succeed in their goals or not. I can't control that. What I can promise you is that when you change your perceptions of problems, turn them into problems into challenges, and then challenges into opportunities, I think your life perspective changes in an entirely different way. And that's my goal, right? Like my new purpose in life is less about me and saying this is about me, and more about saying this is about you. How can we inspire you and provide you guidance and different paths to move from the passenger seat of that car over into the driver's seat, grab a hold of the steering wheel, stop pointing the finger at other people, and start saying, I am going to navigate throughout my own life. I have no idea what's going to happen in the road ahead. It may be a pothole. The road may be blocked. I may see a stopped car on the road and I have to swerve. Whatever that happens, you can receive that information and then react and then hopefully respond in ways that are actually better suited to your overall goal of life. And identifying, like, what does that mean? What does that mean to live in your life, right? It's pretty short, so.
And, you mentioned you started writing this in 2019, and obviously so much of what you're saying, it doesn't sound like it only applies to athletes, can really apply to anybody. But, as an athlete and having, I guess, started this in 2019, you have a pandemic that happens in the middle there. I mean, a lot of what you're saying, it seems like this has just become stuff that everybody's dealing with, whether you are now stuck at home, working on a laptop, or you are an athlete. And we kind of saw, I guess, that big shift. You mentioned Simone Biles as one of the people that, coming out of Tokyo was willing to just say, yeah, the pressure is a little bit too much. I need to do this for myself. I need to do this for the team and everything. Do you feel like that there's been a shift now? Maybe if it is the pandemic or any other reason why now it seems like people are willing to actually come out and be a little bit more forthcoming with this?
I think it's natural progress and excuse me. I think it's natural progress of society to be willing to peel back the layers of what we deem to be normal, what we deem to be acceptable. It's not that unlike of people's idea around race, around sexuality, around acceptance of behavior, right? What was or used to be thought as being in the realm of what I believe to be okay or acceptable from the 40s and 50s is entirely different than what actually happens today. And by the way, we carry our teaching from our great-grandfathers and grandfathers and parents into us and then our environments of how we brought up. That formulates our idea of identity and what we want to align with and what we believe to be acceptable or whatever that is. Now, good, bad, or wrong, I don't personally care. It doesn't matter to me. I just observe this is how society has actually gone through its process. And now we're in the stage of, we're in a totally different environment, right? And it's a really sensitive time. I'm speaking from a place of being American, right? And American has always been, I think Europeans and the Asian cultures always kind of laugh at the US and kind of saying like, you guys have no culture because you have no history, right? It's like, it's such a young country. But I combat that by saying like, I think our culture is actually deeply rooted in innovation and in change in reality. Because we're not married to traditions per se, we're always open to change. We're always open to these things that are allowing us to kind of progress throughout life. And whether we make those decisions in a good way or a bad way, or maybe those acceptances are right or wrong, I think that at least having the conversation is healthy. And so my whole goal of this book is to kind of provide that spark again in people, to let them know that I'm not the answer. This book is not the answer. The answer is reverberated in these lessons that you already know yourself. You're seeking affirmation through an external source. And that's fine if this happens to be in that capacity. But know full well that no one else in this world, no other inspirational speaker, athlete, celebrity, business, mentor is going to provide you with the kickstart that you require. That comes from within. And so how do I give you the reminder that it is up to you how you live your life without knowing what the control mechanism is going to be here, without understanding what the end goal is actually going to be for yourself. You have to identify with that, but knowing full well that we can look back on all the great philosophers and teachers of our time, and we can see similarities in the human movement and the human experience that says, if you cannot find something to live for, then you'll absolutely die with feeling like you have no purpose and meaning. And that's not what we want to have happen. We instead want to have something happen. All the other external goals of what society tells you, what you should look like, what you should have, how you should operate, how much money you should have, what you should buy. To me, all this stuff is noise that distracts you around from what's important to you and your life experience, the loved ones that you have surrounded yourself with. How do you make sure that you're living your life with purpose and passion and fulfillment? And that's hard to say, right? Because like some of us go through life and like, shit, man, I have no idea what my purpose is. I feel like I'm just kind of floating through life, and I feel like I'm a cog in the wheel. I'm just another number in this manufacturing plant that is just going through life. And I think that's normal to feel at times. But what I'm telling people is that that's within your control. And we all come from different environmental backgrounds, different financial backgrounds, economic challenges, or whatever that is. But the prison, and I say this all the time, the prison that is kind of the most overlooked is right between our own two ears. And so, we just want to free people from that, to allow them to do stuff that they love to do stuff that makes them hungry, do stuff that is hard, and to remind them that you can do the hard stuff. That's a part of being human, right? We've persevered through all different types of weird situations, wars and conflict and disease, and we're still here. And that is the human experience. We have evolved over these years. And so a part of that evolution, I think, is also understanding why we do what we do, and how do we grow from those learnings and insights and not just fall back into this abyss of repeating ourselves over and over and over again. And then 10 years goes by and we're kind of scratching our head and wondering, wow, I'm no closer to my goal than I was a decade ago because I've been distracted, giving more energy and time to what the external sources wanted me to do versus really listening to my own inner voice. And that's what I want, right? Is for you to operate in your most authentic self, whatever that is.
Well, it's out in a couple of weeks, and we'll plug it a little bit more at the end of the interview. We're obviously very much looking forward to having people read it and check it out. You were mentioning just there, Apollo, about, viewing yourself maybe a decade ago, things like that. Got to take you back 2 decades ago, because 20 years ago, I can't believe it is 20 years since I can say that a little event happened that Australians remember very fondly, the 1,000 meters at Salt Lake 2002. Might be something you maybe don't remember as fondly as we do in this country. I just want to ask, when it came to that race, that I read in Steven Bradbury's autobiography, you said in that book that you didn't really kind of look at Steve as a threat in that race because you had everybody else going there. But you then said, if anybody else was going to win that race besides yourself, you'd like to see Steven win it because he'd been around for a little bit, fair while in the sport. How do you
Not a little
reflect
bit.
back?
Steve was around for a long time.
He was, yeah. I believe because you first watched short track in '94 when he won our first ever medal. So you were about 12, I think, in '94, weren't you? So probably seeing him create history back there. So there you are racing against him. But how do you look back at that race? I mean, you obviously went on to win a lot more gold medals and everything. But is that one that stands out on a different perspective from you? Obviously, given what happened, and that everyone fell over and he wins this gold medal that is etched in folklore in Australian Olympic history?
Yeah, I mean, it's the single most important race of my life. And it's funny because it's not the color of the medal that I thought that I deserved at the time or that I wanted. No one goes in the Olympics wanting to win a silver medal. Everyone who goes into the Olympics wanting to win a gold medal. That's how we're conditioned to believe, right? Which is fine. But it was a significant race. It represented a lot of things that are much more contextual and layered, I think, now looking back 20 years ago. And it was a really important life lesson that I really carry with me today, not only from Steve in how you look at his lens of life, but also in terms of my own path and how I responded to that. So it's really interesting.
The one thing that I love about the whole race and the story is that you were wearing a pair of skates from Steven Bradbury's company. And he said to you, I believe, if you win the gold, because everyone expected you to win the gold, you've at least got to give me a mention. So do you think that was some sort of weird, like, universal karma going, okay, we'll give you a mention by letting him win the gold, and still he also kind of gets a silver with your skates coming home in second place as well?
Look, I have no idea about the universal karma. I can tell you that life works in very mysterious ways. People don't know, and maybe they do, in that side of the world around Steven's background. So I'll give you the explanation, right? Steven Bradbury, he's actually an incredible physical specimen. Genetically was incredibly powerful and strong. And then you combine that with the guy actually busted his ass. Like, he really trained hard. And I can say this because I love Steve. He just wasn't very good at speed skating. Like, his technical aspect, he couldn't put it together. Okay. Doesn't mean that he physically wasn't gifted. Speed skating is a very technical sport. And so you can be the strongest person in the world, but if you can't transmit that power into the ice efficiently, it's like you're skating 50% below your level. And so, I'd known Steve, I'd known his style. The way that Steven had actually got into the final was something similar. People didn't fall down, but there was like disqualifications and some other things that happened. So he has back-to-back races where, in our sport, we would say, well, he got lucky. But no one cares if you got lucky. All that matters is that somehow, some way, and I love the name of the title of his book, he was the last man standing.
Yeah.
And whether by choice, by default, by pure luck, the ability to, I think Steven was basically watching the last half of the race from the back of the pack, really just watching to see what was going to happen. And then hoping there was going to be some sort of a crash and he could snag the bronze medal or something like of that. I had, before the race, I had already written Steve off. I not in terms of I just didn't think that he was going to be in the mix in the last 3.5 laps of the race. And I was right. He wasn't there. And, to have seen kind of what happened post his winning gold, I think Steven was just as surprised as everyone else was when he won that race. And his going through his own trauma of like having a blade go through his leg, and like multiple times where Steve probably should have just, broke his neck. I mean, this guy like had gone through the most horrific of injuries, and he's always come back, is to me like a testament of like, just when you believe the world has all of its odds against you in every capacity, and the world tells you you're not going to win, other people tell you you're not going to win and you're not good enough and you don't have what it takes. The life that you live works in really mysterious ways. And so if you think about it, Steve had tried to open 100 doors, right? And all 100 doors were locked.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming most of us would be like, all the doors are going to be locked. That's 100 doors. There's not even 1% of these doors that is open. They're all locked in this house. But he kept going, and he tried to open that 101st door, in which when he opened the door and he turned the knob and he was able to step in, and that's how he won. So I think it's an incredible story of like perseverance, et cetera.
And I think that as you say, like, I mean, his book, Last Man Standing, is incredible. It is the entire journey behind it. And of course, everybody just overlooks the journey. They just think of that race. But the thing that I find unique about probably your Salt Lake experience is that a lot of people probably think you come out of those games as the most hated man in Korea, but they don't realize that you're probably one of the most loved mans in Australia. That helped us out with that, and everything that came from that. So did you ever get, ignoring all the hate mail you got from Korea after Salt Lake, did you get any love letters from Australians going like, hey, thanks for that, thanks for the help, we're very happy with that you helped us get a gold?
It's funny because even to this day, when like if I'm doing business and we're talking to a company in Australia, and we'll kind of like, I'll kind of gloss over like my bio, or like one of my partners will give my bio and background, and they're like, oh, he's a speed skater, and they're like, oh, I remember speed skating. Do you remember that race with one of our countrymen, Steven Bradbury? I was like, I remember that race probably better than you do, and here's why. So it's really funny. It comes up more often than not, which is really cool. Even when if I'm doing like corporate executive retreats to like Fortune 100 companies, and we're talking about like leadership principles and reinvention, et cetera, there's always like one Australian in the room who operates like a faction of their company, and he'll like raise his hand and be like, and kind of bring that up. And it's actually really endearing to kind of walk through that race again, because it was such a special time. I was really young. I mean, I always say like I was 19 years old going on 15.
Wow.
Because in the sport, like I feel like your growth is stunted in many ways because you're just spending all your time doing one thing. And so other areas of your personal development is really stunted in its growth. And I just remember going through that process. It was such a weird time. Yeah. Wild.
When we run through 2002 to 2010, I mean, basically watching the Olympics at that time, you expected so many from Team USA to be on the podium. We recently had Chad Hedrick on here, Shawnee Davis, like just kind of run us through. Was there something with the team as a whole? Was it a coaching thing? Was there something in the water? Like, what is it that made you guys so dominant? Because you couldn't watch the Olympics at that time and not see one of you guys sitting on top of the podium.
Well, look, the data around host country bringing in Olympic Games and the correlation between the host country and performance on the podium, excuse me, is very high. So every country that does well in Olympic Games typically has some host country advantage. Home ice, home crowd, it's more funding, etc. So we had trained a lot of the long track team was living in Salt Lake City and in Park City. So they were very well prepared. They, you have the home field advantage. And if you can think about that, whatever and all that looks like, it's a real significant advantage. So just like we're going to see in Beijing next month in February, the fact that they're hosting Olympic Games is going to give them pretty significant advantage. Now, yeah, obviously the athletes have to do their job, but I mean, we were all young. We were all at our peak condition. We had a lot of technology at our fingertips that we weren't releasing to the world. So we were kind of holding that close to the chest. There was a lot of advantages.
And one person we talked to, actually, I believe the first speed skater we talked to on the show, somebody else you're familiar with, Charles Hamlin. When we talked to him, what was that, like over 4 years ago? Heading to Pyeongchang, he was saying, this is going to be my final Olympics. Now we're heading to Beijing. It's not his final Olympics. You going into Vancouver, did you kind of make that decision? This is my final Olympics. And also, I guess, two-part question. If it had not gone the way that you would have hoped, would have imagined, would we have potentially seen you in Sochi? Like, what I guess was the process in determining this is where I want to end my career?
That's a good question. I never even thought about if I didn't get the result that I wanted. I was pretty sure I was ready to move on. I had made the mental switch to say, this is it. Like, prepare as if this is the last race of your life, as if your life is going to end after this moment. That's why I trained so insane. I think it's awesome that Charles is still skating. It's actually pretty remarkable. He's kind of defied the test of time. He's not the same athlete as he was, but he's still a very formidable competitive athlete. I was ready for the next stage of my life. I knew that the easy path for me, guys, was to skate in 2014 and again in 2018. Physically, I had the ability to do that. And I do believe I would have made those teams. I believe I would have made this team coming into the games. So I think I could have skated in effectively 3 more Olympics. And that to me would have been the easy path. I knew that blueprint. It was very familiar to me. And for me to go against the grain and go do things that are completely outside the scope of my expertise was a part of my own personal life learning process. And I was ready for that. It was not easy, but I did so. And so it was really powerful.
Colin was mentioning about that dominance in the long track and the short track from the US sort of in the 2000s. As we go into Beijing, the US actually hasn't won a gold in short track since your gold in Turin. Are we on the cusp of having the drought broken, Apolo? Are we going to see an American gold come short track for Beijing?
I'd like to see that. I think Kristen Santos can do and pull an upset if she's able. It's a very competitive field. A lot of the countries did not go to every single event this year. So the South Koreans and the Chinese have been kind of operating because of COVID and the pandemic. They've been very selective around which competitions they send the athletes to. It's not going to be easy, but I do think we can for sure medal. And again, if Steven Bradbury can do it, like, why not?
And, one of the things that as we're getting ready for the next games, you, I'm guessing, have some type of exposure to these young athletes. One of the things that we run into often on the show is we'll get these athletes who, 10, 20 years ago were the top of the game. And now they're like, it's weird that I have people who are skating the sport now. They say, I got into sport because of you. Are there any skaters on the team that, have told you, you were an influence on me? You're the reason why I'm skating?
I think all of them in some capacity have had some inference to, like watching us skate when we were growing up. I think that's natural. I had the same thing. But it's very weird. I mean, it was weird to be on the same team with athletes who started skating because of you. And that happened to me towards the end of my career, where we had athletes who kind of grew up. They were inline skaters. They had watched me. They were from the same area. And now they're competitive with me and sometimes beat me. That was very, very strange. Yeah.
2 quick things to end the chat on. Don't really want to sit here and talk about Dancing with the Stars, but one thing actually that is weird to connect to you and Steven again is that you obviously went on to some reality TV shows, won a reality TV show. Don't know if you're aware that Steven went to do Survivor. He went on to Australian Survivor. Didn't do too well, unfortunately, old Steven. He got voted out, I think, 4th or 5th.
Wait, why? Steve is he's the most amazing survivor. I never saw that. I didn't even know that was actually a thing. Wait, so what happened?
He got, like, so there was a season and it was basically champions versus contenders. So they kind of had a tribe of, I guess, regular Australians versus, Olympians and Australian sports stars and people like that. And he basically he formed an alliance where he got all the athletes together. We're going to gang up on, like, the models and the poker players and things like that. Started off okay, but then didn't really contingency plans about people working against them. He basically called a female athlete weak to her face, and then everybody went against him. So eventually got voted out. But
oh no,
it was
Steven. He'll tell you exactly what he feels. He does not hold back.
It was very interesting, but at the same time, he's also just released a beer. He's released his own brand of beer. So
I know, I saw that. That is also, that actually is very fitting.
Yeah.
Talk about
You
being
thought about
on brand.
You thought about
It's very
releasing a
fitting.
beer, perhaps, Apollo? Like, maybe? Or
No,
no,
no beer
not
for
quite up
me.
there?
No,
No beer for
no,
you?
not
Right,
not
okay.
quite, not quite.
Not
I don't know
quite.
what I would. Yeah, I don't. I mean, yeah, I'm not sure what I would call it.
There was a brand of chocolate bars on the
When
TV show
yeah,
Lost
what
called
would I call
Apollo
it? Like,
bars.
I saw that.
So, yeah.
What would my beer brand be if it would like relate to the 1,000 meters? Like when you don't want the best, we're here to provide you with something just below. Are you shooting for something below the line?
I see you team up with Steven, and then you have like this great like ad where you're just like, Apollo beer, it's the best, it's so good, and we're falling over, and in comes Bradbury's to get the gold for the beer competition or something like that. So you could work in cahoots with him, perhaps, for that. The other one I wanted to mention, now again, as a Tasmanian, you did a film called Tasmanian Devils. Look, you obviously didn't film it in Tasmania, but tell us about working on the film Tasmanian Devils, Apollo. People don't know what it is. Basically, giant, magnificent creatures called Tasmanian Devils, which your blood, I believe, ignited and kill everyone.
I've actually never seen it, which is interesting. So I got a call from a friend of mine who's a director, and he's like, "Hey, dude, you should come up here to Vancouver. We're filming this sci-fi movie. Love to throw you in it. It'd be really fun. And let's see what happens." And so that's exactly what I did. I just went up there. I was like the finance in this movie. I was like the financier of this like this base jumping crew. And I jumped first, and I actually land and die. I think like in the first like 5 minutes of the film or something.
Get impaled.
I get impaled, which is pretty nasty. So, it was fun. I am not an actor in any capacity. So it was, yeah.
Didn't open any doors. There weren't any talks of you appearing in anything else after that.
Prequel, spinoff.
Sharknado, part 5 or something. No prequels or nothing like that. But the entertainment world is a very strange one. It was really hard to navigate that. And after I went on that show, Dancing with the Stars, there was a lot of opportunity for me to actually participate in continuing a career in that arena. It just never. It was. I like some of the stuff that I've done, and I've always, as a part of my own reinvention, some of the stuff was really important that I basically said yes to everything. Right? Because I didn't know what else I was going to do at. So I did a lot of stuff. I hosted game shows. I went on a lot of TV shows. And it was fun, but I think I like where I'm at now.
And is there any chance we're going to be hearing you? I guess I'd be able to see it, maybe not then, but are we going to be hearing you on the NBC coverage for Beijing?
Yeah, I'll be doing some of the stuff. I won't be doing the full on live broadcast. One of my teammates, Catherine Reuter, is going to be doing that. She'll be managing, but I'll be doing some stuff live via New York and Park City, Utah, which is interesting, right? The 20th anniversary, I'll be in Park City. So it'll be cool.
Is there anything around that? Do you know? Like, has there been much announced around sort of the 20th anniversary of Salt Lake? And if so, are you sort of involved at all?
There hasn't been a lot, which is really surprising. It's a pretty significant milestone, I think, to all of us that were competing in that time. It's also, coming up on this like 20th anniversary, of all the things in the aftermath of September 11th, 2001. So it's got some pretty heavy significance, I think, in this country. And it was also one of the highest and best performing Olympics that we've had as a country, also in terms of sentiment. So I'm on the bid committee to try to bring the games back to Salt Lake City and Park City for 2030. Which
Fantastic.
I think would be a great run because the environment for the games has already been built. The infrastructure is there. The community wants to have an Olympic Games again, and they've shown that they can do so. So hopefully that will happen.
Just don't talk to Colin about that. I think he's team Vancouver 2030. So just rivals again.
Vancouver did an amazing job.
If we lose it, though, I mean, Salt Lake City, I can still technically drive there. As long as I can attend, that's all I care about.
Both beautiful cities.
That's right.
Yeah, both thoroughly deserving. Now, Paul, before I let you go, plug your social media web people, your website, everything along those lines, and where can people find the book and get a copy of it for themselves?
You can find the book on my website, ApoloOhno.com, across all social media at Apolo Ohno. You can buy it via Amazon, etc. I also recorded the audiobook. It'll come out February 22nd.
Great.
And I hope people enjoy it and go and crush it.
That will help people like me who can't read. So I'll be able to at least.
I was going to say, you just got Ben as a customer.
Stole Colin's jokes. Apollo, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today, mate. Thank you so much. And we look forward to actually formally inviting you to Tasmania to maybe interact with real Tasmanian devils and see that they won't impale you and turn into giant creatures if your blood touches them.
Thanks, guys.